Hi guys, my name's Carly. Today we're going to be talking about the books that I read in the first quarter of 2026. So January through March. So I read 10 books in January. It was the biggest month for me this quarter. The first book I read was The Spell Shop by Beth Durst. And this is like a cozy fantasy about a librarian who escaped a burning library and then returned back to her small hometown. And then in that small town, she opens a spell shop, a magical spell shop, to help the citizens of the town. And honestly, this was just a really sweet book to start the year out with. It's not life-changing or anything. I really liked the sentient spider plant, Kaz, that they talk about on the back of this book. And the magical atmosphere was just really charming. And I liked the relationship with Lauren, and it was just comforting and low stress, wholesome. But yeah, not every book needs to change your life. I just wanted something warm to enjoy, something warm and cozy. And like, especially if you're in between like heavier books, this was just a really nice pick-me-up. So yeah, first book of the year, good way to start it out. And I would recommend it, especially if you're a cozy fantasy fan. So this next book I actually don't have a copy of. I read it ebook, so I'll put a picture right here of it. So this is There Is No Antimemetics Division by Quantum. I think that's how you would pronounce that. And this is a very weird, mind-bending sci-fi, like a sci-fi horror. And they're about anti-memes, which if you don't know what an anti-meme is, which I didn't going into this, they're basically entities or ideas that make themselves impossible to remember. And this originally started as a story on the SCP wiki, and I do not know much about SCP lore personally, so you definitely don't need to know anything about that universe before going into it. And if you already are into SCP stuff, then I'm sure this is something that you'll enjoy. But yeah, what I liked most about this book was that concept. The whole idea that the threat can just like erase itself from your memory. It's so unsettling. And so that creates like a disorienting reading experience. Like the characters are lost and then we're just as lost as they are, so we're just like, huh? So if you like weird sci-fi, strange horror, or just books that will confuse you for the most part, then I would recommend this one. But if you prefer straightforward, like linear plot lines where everything's like clearly laid out for you, this will probably not be for you. So the next book I read in January was this beautiful edition of The Raven Scholar. This is the Illumicrate edition. See? Which is funny because I actually bought this before I read the book. Like I had one copy of the book already, and then I saw this at a used bookstore in South Carolina, and I said, that's mine, that's coming home with me, thank you. Even without knowing if I would like it. But I think I got lucky, for sure. And basically this is a fantasy, it has some romance in it, but I would say more of a fantasy. And it is about a scholar named Nima, and she gets pulled into these deadly trials, but then one of the contenders is murdered. So now Nima has to like kind of uncover what is going on. And basically these trials are going to determine the next ruler. Now, with trials, I do love a good trial setting. I mean, I think my first taste of that, me personally, obviously there's so many books with trials, but I really liked it in Throne of Glass, but also you have to keep in mind Throne of Glass was like one of the first fantasy books, like long series that I read, so not saying that Throne of Glass is the first to do trials, because they're not. But yeah, I do love a good trial setting. However, they're definitely one of those things now that I'm further into reading fantasy books and I'm like, okay, here we go again. Like, still, I liked the setup of the book, especially the way it began, because we kind of go into it thinking it's going to be in the perspective of one character, but it's not, and so that was interesting. I've never seen that before. I also appreciated that the characters weren't black or white. Like, they felt like complicated characters. Ruko, especially, if you know, you know, stood out to me as a character that I really wanted to know more about. Even Nima. She could be really frustrating and selfish at times, which I like. I like a main character that's layered and not necessarily likable all the time. And that ending, the twist did get me. Which, that was probably the moment that fully sold me on continuing the series, because before I wasn't really sure. So outside of the ending and like the character work, the plot itself was a little lacking. just because I've seen it done so many times. It's just not unique, which it doesn't have to be fun, so. And the writing was pretty solid. I still enjoyed myself for sure. So yeah, I would recommend The Raven Scholar by Antonia Hodgson. The next book is Carl's Doomsday Scenario by Matt Dinniman. So there's not much I can say about this book specifically without spoiling it because it is the second book in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series. What I can say is that I obviously love Carl and Donut's relationship. Like, their dynamic continues to be one of the best parts of the series for me, for sure. And then of course, Matt Dinniman's humor. It just works for me. Me and him have like the same sense of humor. He's so funny. And I liked the circus-y vibe that we had going on for this. That was really cool. And if you are someone who listens to audiobooks, I have to mention the audiobooks for this series. They're narrated by Jeff Hayes, and his narration is so good. He's just insanely talented with voices. It's like, you'll listen to the audiobooks and every character feels so different from each other. Even though it's narrated all by the same person, he just does accents and just brings characters to life so well. I love it. And then another thing I like about this series is that it's ridiculous and it's fun on the surface. It actually has a lot more emotional depth than you think it would have. So yes, I would recommend this one. I would recommend this series as a whole, especially if you like chaotic, fast-moving books with a little bit of heart. So, okay, so the next book I read was Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. And this book is a literary fiction about two friends, and they create video games over the course of many years. And it really focuses on friendship and love, ambition, success, heartbreak, basically how relationships change over time. This was very much my kind of book. Like, I already know that I already enjoy fiction that focuses more on like character dynamics. Also just like the Y2K-ness of it all. I felt like I was like transported back in time to like that era of gaming, that gaming industry, and that was so interesting. And of course the relationship between our two main characters, Sadie and Sam. It was messy and complicated in a way that was really believable. And without spoiling anything, there was something that happened later in the book that I was not expecting that really hit me hard. And funnily enough, I originally picked up this book, I believe around when it first came out in 2022. I saw it at Barnes & Noble, and it was a Barnes & Noble club pick. And actually a bookseller was like, that book is really good. And I just now got to it, but I'm really glad that I did read it. I just like books where you can sit with the characters and follow them through their lives. So if you like emotionally driven literary fiction and stories about like creatively collaborating and friendship especially, because that's basically the whole core of this story, then yeah, I would definitely recommend this to you. Also, I highly recommend her other book, The Storied Life of A.J. Fikry. I personally liked that one more than this one. This one is good, and this one's the popular one by her, but I really liked The Story Life of A.J. Fikry. It's hard to make me cry at a book, and I did tear up a little bit. And then the next book is going to be The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. And this is a book about a boy named Theo whose life changes after a traumatic event at a museum. And then after that event happens, or kind of during that event, he becomes connected to this priceless piece of art called The Goldfinch. And this is, again, on the emotional train, but I would say this is a bit more emotional. Well, I don't know. I will say it's emotional. I don't want to compare, because I guess it just depends on who you are. But this deals with grief and identity and kind of, you know, how those things affect you later in life and where it can take you. And I picked this book up specifically because I loved The Secret History by Donna Tartt so much, one of my favorite books of all time. So I already knew going into this that I was going to respond really strongly to Donna Tartt's writing. And I know for some people that this is a book that some people think really drags. Like, even when this book had some mundanity, I wasn't bored. Like, I just love her writing that much. I just love the way she structures her sentences and the way she builds her characters. And one of my favorite things was the relationship between Theo and Boris. And this is definitely a book willing to sit inside like the messiness of life, for sure. And then the ending definitely picked up the pace. And funny backstory time. I was very obsessed with Stranger Things when I was younger. So obviously I knew that Finn Wolfhard was in the Goldfinch movie when that came out, whenever that came out. So I was vaguely aware of that adaptation before even reading the book. So now I'm curious if the movie is worth watching. If you've seen it, let me know. So yes, I would recommend this only if you like long literary fiction. It is long. So if you don't mind taking your time with a book. So the next book I read was Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. This is the third book in the Empyrean series, which if you haven't heard of it, how? And also maybe you should keep it that way. Obviously, this is book 3. Can't say much about the general plot of this one. This is coming out as a series, I think, like maybe 5 seasons for the 5 books that are supposed to come out. And I think this might work better in adaptation form, honestly. The things I continue to enjoy are the dragons, obviously, and the graphic audios are fun. But one thing I did notice about the graphic audio version is because it's so dialogue heavy, it can get confusing. You don't really get that grounding narration telling you who is speaking, so like it cuts out all like he said, she said, he giggled, like they just do the action. And then with a cast this big, especially, that it makes it even more confusing. And since I found myself finding it hard to keep track of it, I just switched back to the regular audiobook, but that's not a fault of the graphic audios. Honestly, they're fun. I think maybe they would be better to read on a reread, you know? As for what did not work for me, Xaden's whole bad boy thing, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, it's just not for me. And the spice scenes were just way too frequent for me, personally. I mean, every time they were happening, I was just like, can we get back to the dragons, please? But also, it's just really hard for me to get into a book when I'm not really rooting or like invested for the romance. Also, this book is just so long. I actually don't know if this one is longer than Iron Flame or if it's shorter. However, when a book is this long and I could not tell you much about it in any meaningful detail, that's not a good sign. So personally, I wouldn't recommend this one. That said, I probably will continue the series because I'm stubborn. And like I said, I think this might translate better into a television series. So I can be like, hey, I watched the show, but like I also read the books. So not saying you have to read the books to enjoy a show, but like I want to, because. So if you haven't already committed hours to the series like I have, maybe don't. So what's funny is as I was writing down what I had read for the month of January, I actually left out these next 3 books. So that goes to show how I feel about them. So the next book I read was Girl Dinner by Olivie Blake. I keep stumbling over her name. Olivie Blake. I am so sorry. And this is a dark satirical novel about a college student and a struggling professor. And they get pulled into like this elite sorority. And this elite sorority has like this suspicious wellness scheme going on. And what I like most about this book was Blake's writing style and the college setting. So I can see why people are drawn to her works, but to put it bluntly, with this book specifically, I was bored. And like I said before, I love literary books. I can handle a book where not a lot is happening. You know, especially if I am pulled in by like the prose or the atmosphere, but I just didn't feel that level of investment in this story. And then this book also contained a trope. I'm not gonna spoil it, but it contained a trope that is so overused right now. And while I do think that that trope, while overused, it can still be done well, I think. I just don't think it was executed well in this book. Like, it felt like it was building towards something shocking, when in reality, I feel like a lot of readers are going to expect what's going on here. So all the lead up, it's like, okay, what's the point? And in the book, it kind of felt like we were being told things instead of like shown things in you know, the actions of the characters. So it just felt a little flat. And I know that the book is trying to tackle, you know, the ideas of feminism and motherhood and female rage, but I just feel like the story wasn't compelling enough to carry that weight, honestly. And then there was like pointless smut scenes that I just feel like didn't need to be added. But this was also, I just think, not a good place for me to start with Olivie Blake, to be honest. Because I know this is one of her lower rated, if not lowest rated book, and I've heard better things about her other works. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. And I'm not writing her off completely. I have other of her books. I own a good chunk of them, considering this is the first one that I've read. So let me know in the comments down below which one of her books is your favorite and which one I should read to actually get the good side. Again, no hate, writing was solid, but just not a story for me. So the next book was My Husband's Wife? Yeah, My Husband's Wife by Alice Feeney. So this is a psychological thriller about a woman who goes for a run before her art exhibition, and then when she comes home, she finds that her key no longer works in the lock of her house. And so when someone answers the door, it's this woman, and this woman looks just like her. And her husband is insisting that this woman that looks just like her is his real wife. And this is one of those books that is easy to pitch because the premise is so twisty. And while I was reading it, honestly, I did have a great time. It moves, it keeps you curious, and I did like the audiobook narration, especially like the sound effects that we got. My main issue was the ending. It got a little confusing, and I wasn't the only one that was confused because, of course, I did one of my little Reddit deep dives that I do. Tell me I'm not the only one that does that. If you're ever like confused or like want to know more about a book that you've read, I always like the first thing I do is open Reddit and like search. But yeah, I did my Reddit deep dive and a lot of people were saying the same thing, that they were confused by the ending. And thankfully on one discussion that I found, there were some users that broke it down and made it a lot easier for me to understand. But I don't think I should need like a homework assignment to understand the book that I'm reading. And overall, there were some plot points that did seem like they were a bit convenient. And then there were also plot points that were shaky at best, plot holes, essentially. But that being said, if you're willing to overlook those things and just enjoy the ride, you know, enjoy it for what it is, yeah, I would recommend it. And now, if you do read it and you end up being confused by the ending, then you know that you can just go to Reddit and and get the answers. So, Duskbound is the next book that I read by Grenwich and Lennox. I actually got this, no, not this copy, the first book in the series, Riftborn. I got that from a cute little bookstore in a city near where I live. It's like a romance only bookstore. I love it. It's adorable. But regardless, Duskbound. So the way the first book ends completely changes the direction of the series. So I can't say much about this one again without getting into spoiler territory. So with that being said, I'll talk about Riftborn if you don't know what Riftborn is. It is an enemies to lovers fantasy romance that follows Fia Riftborn, and she's an outcast with hidden magical powers, and she's basically navigating this city that has a lot of prejudice, magic, and political unrest. You know, typical fantasy world. So as she begins to kind of understand more about her magical abilities, she's forced into close quarters, forced proximity, with a member of the Deadly Guard. And so that is where survival and rebellion and romance all start to mishmash. And this is entertaining and easy to read, and I do like how much the plot shifts from the first book, so you're kind of getting, you know, it doesn't feel so samey. The series as a whole is still, you know, it's not anything unique, and it wasn't very memorable. Like, the world hasn't really stuck with me. And that could just be middle book syndrome because this is the second book in what's soon to be a trilogy. And basically at the same time, I am interested to see where the series is gonna go. I'm interested to see how the trilogy ends, but I'm also really excited to read The Ascended. I've heard so much hype about The Ascended. That is literally why I started the series in the first place, is because everyone was talking about The Ascended, it's so good. But then everyone in the comments that I was seeing was like, you need to read Riftborn and Duskbound first. So I was like, got it. I'm excited. I'm just interested in seeing what all the hype is about and why people are like freaking out, especially over the ending. Like they're like, yeah, if you are someone who just absolutely eats up fantasy romance every time, then I definitely think you'll like this one. Like I said, especially if you like enemies to lovers and training scenes, you know, especially in the first book. Okay, so now we're doing February, and in February I read 6 books. Compared to January's 10, we took a little bit of a step down, but that is okay. This tiny little book, Fever Dream, which this is written by, please tell me how to pronounce her name if I am not pronouncing it correctly, because it is translated fiction. Samanta Schweblin? And it's translated by Megan McDowell, I believe. Yeah, translated by Megan McDowell from Spanish. And this title, Fever Dream, is accurate. It did feel like a fever dream. Again, it is this short, eerie novel. And basically it starts with our main character Amanda lying in like this rural clinic. And this creepy boy named David is walking her through the events that led her there. And this book is full of dread. Just dread about motherhood, illness, environmental danger. And I read this in one night, which I just felt like was perfect for a book of this size. Just a little snack. And again, I also, you know, like with There Is No Antimemetics Division, that book, I need to find a way to shorten that title. With that story, I liked it because I like books that I have no idea what is happening. And I know that's not everybody's thing, but I love finishing a book and then being really confused about it and then immediately going online to see how other people interpreted it, honestly. It's just so fun to see what other people think. And the main topic of this book, keeping it vague, is not something that I have personally read about. I don't think I might have read some things with this theme, but the way it's done, I don't think I've read anything like this before. And yeah, I would recommend it because it's short, it's not a big time commitment. So if this sounds like it would be up your alley, you know, just try it because, I mean, it is quite literally not even 200 pages. And the text is so big and the margins as well. Like, again, if you want a clear story, linear story, completely understand. Don't pick up this one though, because that is not this. And why do I do this to myself? Why do I keep reading romantasy even though I seem to have the same problem with it every time? Brimstone, beautiful, beautiful edition. Like, are you kidding me? Stunning. Like, this is the sequel to Quicksilver. If you don't know what Quicksilver is, it is a romantasy about a girl named Saris Fane. And she gets transported to this icy, like, fae realm called Yuvelia? And she ends up stuck with a powerful fae warrior, of course, named Kingfisher. And Callie Hart is a really interesting author for me, to be honest, because I usually do not gravitate towards smut-heavy books. And yet I still really seem to enjoy her works, for the most part. Well, I guess I haven't read that much, so can I really be the judge? I've read like 3 books by her. But the first book I read by her was Requiem, back in 2023. And that book had some parts in it that definitely disturbed me. Oh, and the sex scenes were extremely detailed. But the main character in that book, Theo, is just, he's just such a sweetheart. If you've read that book, he is like the sweetest guy. But one thing that I do notice about her books is that the male main characters do like a complete like 180 personality switch whenever the spicy scenes happen, which ick. And in Quicksilver, it wasn't doing anything groundbreaking. In fantasy, in romantasy, I knew that. Okay, I still really enjoyed it. Brimstone though, did we really need that much spice? I felt like the author didn't care about the plot as much because they were like, gotta get those spicy scenes in. Like, if it had stayed similar to the first book in the balance of the intimacy scenes and the plot, then I would have found myself enjoying it more. But I just felt myself getting frustrated with this one, honestly. Like, I audibly sighed multiple times while reading this. The ending, though, of course, with every situation I find myself in, the endings are always so good. It's like they don't care about anything before then. So the ending did make me curious. I'm not fully closing the door on continuing this, but I don't know. If I hear good things about it, you know, I could be convinced. But if I do end up continuing the series, then I should probably read the extras that the author posted on her website, because I think they add a lot of important context that I would need to know for the next book. So, Direbound by Sable Sorensen. Sable Sorensen. That's a bit of a tongue twister, my bad. This is about a girl named Marin, and she enters a set of dangerous trials to save her sister. And when she's there, she gets pulled into the castle politics, rivalries, direwolf bonds, and of course, romance. This one really did not work for me. It's another spicy TikTok romantasy. Why do I keep doing this to myself? I will say, the direwolf angle is something that's new. That is new. I don't see... We do see werewolves, but these were kind of like actual wolves in a way. I'm sure they're different. Maybe they're bigger. I don't really know what a direwolf is. I'll give it that. Other than that, just samey. Like I said, samey. Copy paste of what's popular right now. Also, the twist in this book, I guessed it like, I don't know how soon into the story, but pretty soon. Pretty soon. I was literally like reading it. I was like, okay, well, everything you're doing now is literally just confirming what I think is happening. And I'm just baffled how popular this is. I just kept wondering if I missed something, because this has like a 4.33 on Goodreads or something like that. I don't know. No, I wouldn't recommend this one, and maybe I need to take a break from romantasy for a little bit. Am I going to? I don't know. Because it's just like I'm chasing that high of like the really good romantasies. Do you know what I mean? And then I'm just getting bleh. So it might just be that I'm reading a lot of them and they're starting to blur together, or really the industry is just publishing the same stories over and over. Like, I feel like in the past it wasn't like this. Like, I still like feel like we got variety within the genre. You know, you can lean on heavy trope usage and still write amazing characters that I feel for, and like found family, which again is what I said about The Raven Scholar. I really think the characters in that were very complex and layered and made me want to know more. But this was like copy paste, not only in plot execution, but just like the characters. Like, I feel like I could just change her name to any other character in a romantasy and I'd be like, oh yeah, that's like the same character. They just have different names. I don't know. Next we have The Penultimate Truth by Philip K. Dick. This is a classic, and it is a sci-fi story about people who are living both above and below the surface of the earth. Basically, underground, millions of people have spent years believing that World War III is devastating the planet. Well, on the surface, the war is over, and there's these people maintaining the lie to keep everybody in that system, essentially. I really liked the premise of this because stories about propaganda and manipulation are really interesting to me. And I think it's especially interesting seeing how, you know, because this is a classic, you can kind of see how those fears echo into the present. The anxiety around mass deception and media control and distorted reality, just, it feels really relevant to today still. And while I did find the concept interesting, the book itself kind of fell a little flat. You know, as someone who reads, not a lot, but I guess a decent amount of science fiction or science fiction inspired stories. And it's not the book's fault, it's a classic. It didn't feel fresh. I mean, I definitely think it would have been more striking in its time. And then as well, the pacing was a little bit slow. My recommendation might be a little bit specific because if you're already a seasoned sci-fi reader, I don't think this is a must read. But you know, if you want to read the classics, like if that's something your goal is, you know, to see the stories that inspired the books that we read today, like the dystopian fiction especially, then yeah, I would say this is worth checking out. So very, a yes under specific conditions. Maybe not for me though. So the next book is the Dungeon Anarchist Cookbook, sorry, by Matt Dinniman. Book 3 in the Dungeon Crawler Carl universe. Now this section of the series, if you read the books, this section is known for being confusing. And yeah, I would say that reputation is served. There's like this whole subway system that's just, it can feel like absolute nonsense at first when you're like trying to process everything. At the beginning of the book, Matt Dinniman makes very clear that you don't have to know the mechanics of what is happening to understand the story. So if you're watching this and that was something that you're worried about, please read this book. And yeah, nothing else to add, don't want to spoil anything. The emotional depth is depthing even more than the previous books, so. Oh, and would I recommend? Yeah, yes, duh, recommend the whole series. Well, what I've read so far, I haven't heard that it goes downhill, so that's why I'm faithfully saying that it's gonna stay as good, please. So next I read All the Colors of the Dark by Chris Whitaker. Oh, and this is the last book of February, apparently, as I'm looking at my list. I never know what's happening. And this is a dark literary thriller that spans around 25 years, from the 70s to the early 2000s. And it starts with a missing persons case. But even though that's how it starts, it really goes deep into, you know, the themes: love, trauma, friendship, and a search, like a lifelong search for answers. One of the things I enjoyed the most, obviously, was the friendship between Patch and Saint, our main characters. And I thought that Chris Whitaker's writing and storytelling were really strong. And I liked the way that the book deals with childhood trauma and the long-term impact of what that can do to someone. It felt sincere and it felt well developed. My biggest mixed feeling about this book is the pacing. So it has a lot of short chapters. Like, it has hundreds of chapters. 259. I just checked. It has 259 chapters. Yet it somehow still felt slower than expected. And then because it was doing a lot, like literary fiction, thriller, emotional drama, you know, this bigger life story, it felt like it was trying to do just a lot at once. And there's this one specific character whose ending really, oh, it hurt me. And their ending, it made sense, but I just really wanted something different for them. I just felt so bad. And this is one of those books that's really difficult to talk about because as I was reading it, I loved it. And I thought it was well written. But it's just, you know, as I talk about it and as I look back on it, I realized it just didn't leave the biggest impression on me. I think about the characters the most. Like, the characters are what I remember just more than I did the plot necessarily. But regardless, I would recommend it, especially if you like heavier books with strong character work. Last month is going to be March, and I read 8 books in the month of March, starting with King of Ashes by S.A. Cosby. And this is definitely something unique. It is a gritty southern crime thriller, and it's about this man who returns to his Virginia hometown after his father ends up in a coma, and he finds that his family's basically falling apart and his brother is tangled up with some very dangerous people. And it's a family drama at its heart about loyalty and buried secrets, and how far someone would go to protect the ones that they love. This one worked for me pretty much immediately. I love complicated family dynamics, and of course the moral complexity of the characters. And the ending was twisty, even though I did kind of predict it. But what I liked about this book is that it didn't sacrifice the plot to emphasize the emotional or thematic elements. Like, it still feels tense and propulsive while still focusing on character development. And that balance can sometimes be hard to pull off, but I think this author pulled it off really well. I liked the audiobook. I liked the guy that narrated it. I don't know his name, but I'll try to put it on the screen if you guys are interested. And the reading experience kind of felt like cinematic to me. It was like I was watching like a crime movie or like a really intense TV show. Now, I would recommend this one unless you're someone who's sensitive to violence, because it can get pretty dark. This is the only S.A. Cosby that I've read, but if you've read his other books, let me know, because I've heard really good things about Razorblade Tears, and yeah, I really want to read more by him. So the next book I read in March was The Woman in Me. Wait a second. Oh my gosh, guys. I know it'll probably already be stated somewhere else, but I didn't mention how many books I read in March. I read 8. Yeah, 8. Anyways, The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. And this is Britney Spears' memoir, if you couldn't tell. And it covers what her life was like. Basically, you know, the fame and conservatorship that she was under that was ran by her father. And I'm trying to read more nonfiction in general because I keep noticing that every time I read nonfiction, it's like one of the best books that I've read, you know, of that month. I end up liking nonfiction a lot more than I think I will. And this was definitely one of those cases. I read this book in a day with my eyeballs. These things, not an audiobook. That is extremely rare for me, honestly. But the main thing is I just really appreciated to hear her side of the story. And I know some people have criticized the writing style, but it didn't bother me. Honestly, I thought that the simplicity of the writing just made it easier for me to absorb what she was saying anyways. Plus, it's not like I go into a celebrity memoir like expecting elaborate prose. Like, I went into it, I wanted honesty and perspective and something that's readable, and I got that. And I just came away from this story feeling a lot of sympathy for Britney. And even if you are not a huge Britney fan, which I wouldn't consider myself a huge Britney fan either, so I think you would enjoy this. Then I read All In by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, and this is the 3rd book, so can't say much. This is the 3rd book in the Natural series, which is a YA crime thriller series, and it's about our main character, Cassie, and she's a teenager, and she's really good at like reading people, and because of that she's recruited into this FBI program that specifically focuses on teens for some reason, specifically focuses on teens with like exceptional profiling abilities or some type of ability. Like ability that can help them solve cases. And basically that team just keeps getting dragged into increasingly dangerous investigations. And this is just one of those series that is so easy to read. It's YA, so it's very digestible. And there's a cute side romance, and the cases are usually interesting. And on top of that, there's also a central mystery that's like a through line through the series. I also really love like the found family dynamic between the whole crew. Sloane especially, she's a standout. She's quirky and smart and socially awkward, but like I relate to her. Like I find her so endearing. The only issue is Jennifer Lynn Barnes, her writing can be a little cringy sometimes. And then there are points in the story where like the momentum will dip and then I get a little bored. But I would say generally the stories are interesting enough to keep me going. So yes, if you like crime thrillers or something more crime focused without it getting too dark, you know, compared to other thrillers I've talked about, then I would recommend this one. So the next book is going to be Wicked by Gregory Maguire. And this is a darker retelling of The Wizard of Oz where it tells the story of Elphaba, who is the Wicked Witch of the West. Why did I almost say East? No. And basically how her life, her beliefs, and the politics of Oz led her there. And this was a buddy read with my friend Allie, and he gifted me this copy. So if you're somehow watching this far and listening to my rambling, thank you. And I went into this series because I was obsessed with the Wicked musical and movie, and I already knew there were going to be some differences. And I was surprised just how different this was. The musical is only really based loosely on this. The book is much darker, much more adult. But yeah, I kind of liked that. I felt like I was getting a whole new separate story. And I liked the themes that it goes into. Honestly, the prejudice that is going on through Oz, ambition and the friendships, moral ambiguity, and the gap between who someone really is and how history perceives them. My main complaint is with the audiobook. I think I would have preferred a female narrator. I mean, it is such a female-centered story, so he did a good job with what he had, but it just would have helped me feel a little bit more immersed. And I did find out that this first book is really the only one that focuses on Elphaba, like with her as the main POV. And it makes me hesitate a bit with continuing the rest of the series because I'm not sure how interested I am with reading about the other characters. Still, I would recommend at least the first book, but if you're expecting the same tone as a musical, sorry, that's not what this is. The Snow Child by Eowyn Ivy? Wow, this woman. This follows a grieving couple in 1920s Alaska whose lives are changed after they make a child out of snow. And then they encounter a mysterious girl in the wilderness. And it has a very quiet fairy tale-esque setting. I loved this book. I mean, her writing is just so beautiful. The setting, incredible. I genuinely felt like I was in like that snowy Alaskan landscape. Oh, the ending destroyed me in the best way. It was so sad, but beautifully done. I thought the relationships between the characters were handled really well as well. Honestly, I don't have much bad to say about this book. It made me want to immediately read more from this author, so if you have read any of her other novels, please let me know and I'll check them out if I can. And yes, I would absolutely recommend it. It is like the quintessential winter book. You know, if you can't do grief-heavy books and you're not a literary fiction fan, then I would not recommend this one, but it's so worth a read. So if that sounds like something that would interest you, please check it out. I would say this is one of my favorite, if not my favorite. I don't know. I'm so bad and indecisive when it comes to reading things, but considering how much I've yapped about this so far, take that as you will. Thank you. Ooh, guys, the song of the night right now. Comfortably Numb by Pink Floyd. Absolute banger. The Gate of the Feral God, another Dungeon Crawler Carl book, and the last Dungeon Crawler Carl book that I have read in this quarter. So that's enough. You can stop worrying that I'm gonna bring up another one. But I will annoy you all I want with this series because it is great. We all have those weeks, you know? And so the week that I was reading this, I just felt like I wasn't grasping what was happening, and it was nothing to do with the story. You know, it was a me thing. So that is when I started looking into episode recaps. My brain was just, I guess, kind of scattered. I found this podcast called Hello Crawlers, and it is hosted by these gentlemen, Grant, John, and Martin. So they're awesome. They're awesome. They're so funny. They do really good like chapter by chapter discussions of every book. And even if I end up not being confused by the plots of future books in this series, I believe I will still continue to listen to their discussions because they're just that entertaining. And the reason why I brought them up is because if you ever felt like how I just described while reading any of the books, or you just kind of want like that sense of community, well, I mean, the subreddit is also really great for that. There's so many fans that post on there. They're awesome. But, you know, just hearing someone talk about the series, it's like you're reading it all over again. And it's fun. It's like you're talking about it with friends. But I still do have my mom to talk to about these, so that's awesome. I convinced my mom to read this series, and she, I think, has finished the first 3. So she hasn't read this one yet. So, Mom, if you're watching this represents my reading taste in a way that is embarrassing. I like weird girl fiction, okay? I like it. And this is 700 Monas by Jan Sains. I'm just gonna describe this in the best way I can without making it awkward for us, okay? This follows a grieving college student who is looking through her late mother's closet. And in her late mother's closet, she finds some pills, and they are called Mona. And this is a rare experimental drug that causes an intense physical response, if you catch my drift, okay? And so basically, she is forced to sell. There's 200 pills in this stash. She's forced to sell all of those within 48 hours, and it gets really dark and chaotic, but it tackles grief. Lots of grief books. Am I trying to say something? Repression, desire, and my favorite topic, self-destruction. I love a messy story. And this is just the kind of outrageous premise that gets my attention, okay? And the one thing that surprised me is that the romance was actually kind of sweet. I mean, Wolf, our main guy, he's genuinely respectful and compassionate. And in a book with a premise like this, that romance is wholesome, and I really like her writing style. I think this is her debut. Yeah, it's her debut, so congratulations. I'm interested to see what else she'll come up with. My biggest issue was I like to listen to audiobooks to distract myself from reality, as one does. And I could not do that with this one. It was painfully awkward trying to. You can guess why. So yeah, that was genuinely hell, and so I gave up on trying to listen to this in public. So yeah, if you're into weird, chaotic literature and don't mind a book that does get a little explicit, check this one out. Like I said, I was just intrigued by what they were going to do with this, and I think it hits a lot harder emotionally than you would think. And the last book I read for this quarter, The Wolf King by Lauren Puffreman. And this is a romantasy, who would have thought, about Princess Aurora, and she's kidnapped by a powerful alpha, which sparks a war between humans and wolves. And as she grows closer to her captor, a forbidden romance develops. And as she begins to realize that not every wolf is evil, her captor, begins to realize that the people around him may be just as dangerous as his enemies are. And what I liked the most about this book was the setting, the atmosphere, because it takes place in like a Scottish setting, like Scottish Highlands, I think. A lot of people compare it to Outlander. And the audiobook was dual narration, and it had the accents, the Scottish accents and English accents, and that added a lot. I love dual narration books, depending on if the male narrator is good. That can make or break it. And Callum, the love interest, is so sweet. Something I don't like. I feel like my ship is not going to win because I feel like this book is heading towards a very predictable trope. No spoilers, but I kind of see where it's going, and I'm tired of it, man. I just want the sweet guy to win. I'm tired of the shadow daddies. Can we please let this like sweet, like so kind man win? Please. Again, leans on a lot of very familiar romantasy tropes. Though I will give it credit for the setting being something you don't see too often. Again, people compare it to Outlander, so there's that. I'll probably read the next book just to see where it goes. I have the next book over here. It's in hardback because my mom bought the hardback, but the hardback is gorgeous. Like, it drives me crazy that they're not the same, but like, look at that. But I won't be surprised if I find myself DNFing it, because I feel like I know where the romantic plot is gonna go. But who knows, maybe it will surprise me. Wow, that was a long one. But yeah, that was the 24, I had to calculate that, the 24 books I read in the first quarter of January. Excuse me? Of the year, sorry. So it's gonna take me a second to get used to like this whole thing. So if I seemed awkward, I promise I will get better as time goes on. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch this video when there are so many other people you could have watched. That means a lot to me, so thank you. If you have any things you want to see from me, let me know.